This is the last video in a three-part series about making rechargeable battery packs from 18650 lithium-ion batteries. In the first video, I mentioned how important it is to know what the voltage and the amperage is going to be for your particular project. In this video, we're going to talk about the higher amp starter motor battery project, how I determined the amps, why I didn't use a BMS, and instead how I'm using the cell meter to monitor the condition of the battery pack, determining the number of cells in parallel that you need for your project. Then we'll talk about a fish finder project and what I found out about an internal safety device in these lithium-ion batteries called a CID, or current interrupting device. I'll show you the scuba light as it's finished, how I use some heat shrink tubing to protect from short circuits. Then I'll make some final comments on the cell grader, quality of batteries from different sources, and batteries that don't hold a charge. I checked the current requirements for the starter motor on my motorcycle by taking this multimeter and putting this amp clamp over the wire from the battery, and then I started the motorcycle and it registered about 30 to 40 amps. I'm going to show you now how to do that on a bench. I have a spare starter motor set up on the bench here, along with the battery pack that I made and the multimeter that's clamped over the plus side of the battery. I'm going to turn this multimeter to 40 amps right there and watch this screen. So I'm going to connect this wire to the starter and watch the screen. So that registered about 19 amps. So I would double the amps, maybe 40 amps to start that motorcycle. The alternator on my motorcycle has not charged this pack to more than 14.5 volts. Which is just under the 14.8 volts nominal for a 4S pack. Because of that, it will not overcharge the pack. At least that's what I think, and that's what my checking has told me when I pull the pack out and take a voltage test after riding the motorcycle for an extended period of time. The reason I didn't put a BMS in this is because BMSs that deliver 100 amps are very expensive. And this battery, when it's starting my motorcycle, it only is on for less than about 3 seconds before that starts. So what I do with this guy is I check it for balance once or twice a season. This is a cell meter. RC hobbyists use this to make sure that their battery packs are in balance. And I wired this battery pack up. So here's the cell meter connected to this battery pack. And you choose what type of battery it is with this key. And I'm going to just make it go down to lithium ion. And then with this key, it tells you well, right here it displays the entire voltage for this pack, 14.29 total voltage. 3.6 is the maximum voltage. 3.55 is the minimum voltage, and it's in cell 2. And the difference is 0.061. Now, if your pack is less than half a volt off from parallel cells to parallel cells in the series, then you'll be okay with your battery pack. You won't be generating a lot of heat. If it gets worse than half a volt out of balance, then you have to do something to fix that, or you start to overheat the batteries. One of the last things to consider about making a pack, depending on what it is that your application is how many cells in parallel should you have. Now on this motorcycle pack, I didn't want to use very high capacity batteries because you don't use all that capacity. You only have this battery starting the motorcycle for about 3 seconds or so. So these are all 1.5 amp hour batteries, and I used a lot of them in parallel so that the amps per battery needed to start this, say at 30 amps or 40 amps, is less than if I had high capacity batteries with only a few of them. So for me, it made a lot of sense to use more batteries and reduce the amps per battery. Let's talk a little bit about this fish finder project. This is another project, this very small project, but this is another 1P4 series 12 volt application, and I put this guy together for a friend of mine that wants to use it to run a fish finder, and these are 2 amp hour batteries. So his fish finder runs at about 0.3 amps, 0.2 to 0.3 amps. So this 2 amp hours should run that fish finder for 10 hours. Now the thing I wanted to point out here is that I'm using Capon tape to keep these wires next to the battery and keep them from flexing right at where I have them soldered, so that they don't break off at this point. When you put your multimeter on the positive and negative poles and it shows nothing, it's likely that that battery has been overcharged to the point where a high pressure has built up inside the battery, and this contact right here has been disconnected from the battery. Now what I mean by that is just underneath this contact there's a dome-shaped, kind of like that, a dome-shaped disc that seals the inside of the battery from the outside. And if there's a high pressure in there, that dome pops up and disconnects the battery from this contact point. Now, if that happens, and it was maybe your fault because you left it on the charger too long, you can take a little pin like this, and you can stick it inside the vent holes and pry it down. You have to do it almost all the way around. Pry it down to make that dome pop back down and make contact again. Now, that battery might be suspect for a while, so you should keep an eye on it that it doesn't overheat or on charging or discharging. I want to show you the completed scuba light pack. This pack is complete. I soldered the dangling wires to this BMS, and I also soldered the plug to use the cell meter to the BMS. And I'd show you my soldering techniques, but they don't always turn out pretty. Anyhow, I wanted to do that because I use this battery pack for an application that uses about 3 amps instead of the scuba light that takes about 0.2 or 0.3 amps. So let's plug this guy in and check this pack with the cell meter. So I'm going to change the battery type to lithium ion. The maximum voltage is 16.4 volts. The highest cell is at 4.15 volts. The lowest cell, parallel cell, is at 4.07 volts. And the difference is 0.08 volts, which is well below my suggested max of half a volt out of balance. So this pack is in really good shape. I soldered this plug onto the battery pack to make it convenient to switch from scuba light to my other application. And you'll notice that I put heat shrink tubing on there. This is what the plug looks like before it's soldered in place. And you can see that there's exposed copper here. The heat shrink tubing makes it so that it's another protection to avoid any kind of short circuit. So these plugs are handy to have. You can get these at Battery Hookup or maybe some other source. These were, I think, around $6 or $7. And the heat shrink tubing, I bought this kit of a variety of sizes for I think under $10 from Amazon. Anyhow, let's put this guy together. Of course, it works just fine. Here are some final thoughts on the cell grader and quality of batteries. If you check batteries on a device like this and set them aside for a day or a week or longer, and they don't hold a charge, like for instance, if it charges it up to 4.2 volts, and a day or a week or a month after that it's below 4 volts or maybe even down to 2 volts, that battery, no matter what that device says, the battery's no good. Now it might be usable, if you charge it and use it right away, but if it doesn't hold voltage for an extended period of time, for me it's not worth the time and effort to build up a pack with batteries that are going to lose charge over time. Batteries from Japan and Korea are typically pretty good, or very good. There are some batteries from China that are also good, but there are also batteries that claim to have tremendous number of amp hours, and they don't deliver it. So I would be very careful about buying batteries from China, especially ones that claim things that are way out of typical. Well, I think we've covered all the topics. It should save you time and money if you get into this project building. I hope you found it instructive. If so, like and share. Thanks for watching.